Check in here. Should be set. All right, perfect. We should be good to go here. So everyone, welcome to our second night with the UConn men's basketball beat writers. For those of you who aren't familiar with me, my name is Jared Kotler. I host the Connecticut Scoreboard podcast, and I'm really excited to have a great panel here with me tonight. We had a lot of fun at our last one when we did the season wrap-up last year, so happy to have all you guys back. I think most of the people who are watching this are familiar with the group that's assembled here today, but why don't we do just a couple quick introductions. Dom, we'll start with you and work our way down the line here.
Dom Amore, Hartford Current, beat writer since 2011, reporting for duty.
Gavin Keefe, I work at the Day in New London. This is my 31st year covering the team, so I'm old.
The Dean.
Hanging on by a thread.
We got Dave with us. Dave, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, is Neil frozen or something? Yeah, Dave Borges, Hearst, Connecticut Media, which is New Haven Register, Connecticut Post, some other papers. And I've been on the beat since 2007. 2007 away was my first season, so this will be like, the 13th year?
Yeah, there we go. And we'll see. All right, let's see if we've got Neil. Neil, can you hear us and give a quick intro?
Yeah.
All right, Neil, we'll come back to you in a minute here once we can see we get your Wi-Fi going there. But again, thanks everyone for joining us on the panel tonight. Let's jump right into things. When we did our postseason wrap up last year, I think we all thought things would be relatively back to normal to start this season. But as we all are well aware, things are anything but normal right now. Dom, I'll throw this one to you to start. What is the state of things right now for the UConn men's basketball program? You know, what have the team been able to do? What haven't they been able to do? And are we actually going to see games played next week as we were supposed to get?
Well, essentially, when you ask that, Jared, you're asking me to predict the pandemic, and no one's been able to do that. They had a fairly normal off-season. They were able to do everything that they would usually do up until November 5th when they had a player test positive. They've been paused ever since. If it is a 14-day quarantine, they would be back to work on Thursday. That's the 19th. So if that happens, maybe they could get themselves ready to play Central Connecticut on the 25th or UHart on the 27th. Those are games that they kind of had penciled in. But there's no contract signed for those games yet. They're not posted on the schedule. So my inclination is to believe that if they can get back Thursday or shortly thereafter, that they would probably open the season December 1st against Vanderbilt at Mohegan Sun. I mean, that's all total guesswork on my part, but it's just basically going by what I'm just looking at the calendar, looking at the timeline, and that's what makes the most sense to me.
Dave, I know on your most recent podcast episode, you had Jeff Goodman on, and the two of you talked about some of the different options out there, whether there's a push to move to just conference-only games, whether or not bubbles are something that we could see. Summarize a bit what you and Jeff talked about there and where things are standing right now.
Yeah, well, Jeff is of the opinion, which I pretty much agree with, that if they had just decided to do conference games from the start, it might have been the best idea. I don't know if you can do that right now, but then again, the whole season is going to kind of be on the fly. So, is it possible that you could end up playing conference only or almost entirely conference games? I suppose it's possible. I think that might have been the best idea because, just look at the Mohegan event. I mean, UConn could be playing. USC is going to fly in. BYU is flying in. You're going to have Arizona State's going to be in Mohegan Sun. Teams from all over the country. It does seem to be sort of an unnecessary risk, I guess, bringing all these different schools in from all over the country. And So with that in mind, conference only would make a lot of sense. But the other argument is that, you have a certain amount of time, and it could be an expanded amount of time. And I kind of agree with Rick Pitino's idea of delaying the start of the season, maybe even ending up with May Madness. But you got to get in a certain amount of games. 13, I believe, is the minimum, 27 the maximum. And with all the stop and starts the season might have, it might make sense to get in as many non-conferences as you can, especially between Thanksgiving and January when no one's on campus. Of course, we also have some conference games too in there. So it's really confusing. It's really tough to figure out. All I know is that you can't, like Dom said, it's impossible to predict what's going to happen other than there's going to be a lot of chaos this year.
Gavin, you mentioned in your intro, you've been on the beat for quite some time. I'm guessing this has to be one of the crazier preseasons for you. And as you try to get ready to cover the team, minimal access to the team. By now we would have already had at least one exhibition game or a scrimmage, been able to talk a little bit more with the team in person. What has it been like getting ready to cover this team this year and during this preseason? What's it been like, working on that end?
Well, it's definitely been a lot more difficult for all of us because, we have to do everything via Zoom, and we're grateful to get the time that we get, but it's not the same as going up to campus and, maybe getting somebody off to the side one-on-one or talking to more players. So it's been more difficult that way, and everything's so unpredictable. I mean, it's really kind of, in a way, hard to plan some things in advance because you might have a story in mind a couple of days, then something might happen and then blows it up. So, I mean, it just... Or the other hand, you wake up in the morning and you find out UConn's got to go into quarantine and you got to, do something there. So it's a very unpredictable day-to-day thing, and it's going to be that all season. So it's going to be a challenge for all of us and the fans too to kind of, not get frustrated and just have to ride this thing out. There's nothing any of us can do about it. It's going to be different when we go to games. We're going to have to do interviews on Zoom, even though we'll be there in person, which that's understandable. They don't want us to have close contact with anybody. So it's going to be completely different than anything we've ever done.
All right, we'll try, Neil, do we have you, I know we were having some connection issues. We'll give you another shot here before we jump back in. Give us a thumbs up if you can hear us or not. All right, it looks like he still might be frozen. We'll keep him on there, and if he can jump in at any time, Neil, feel free to jump in. But we'll go in reverse order here. And Gavin, we could start with you on this one. Enough of the COVID talk in time to talk some basketball. What's one storyline that each of you are looking for heading into this season? And Gavin, we'll kick things off with you.
Oh, wow. That's there's so many with this team. It's kind of hard to pick one. I mean, there's the comeback, injury comeback with Pauly and a Cook. There's a new players. How do they fit in? Can Book Knight be the star that they want him to be and he wants to be? What impact can the newcomers have? If Pauly gets off to a slow start because he's, still battling back from his knee, or Cook can't join till they hold him out to January or something. I just think that other guys are going to have to step up. How's a guy like RJ Cole going to fit in? I mean, Tyrese Martin, another guy, new guy showing up, an older guy showing up. Transfer. So I think there's so many things that you can look at with this team. That's what makes it going to make it such an interesting season.
Dave, how about on your end? Something you're looking forward to this season?
I don't know. I think Gavin took everything, but there really are a lot of. I'll go with obviously Book Knight is a really, to me, it's very interesting how he shows out this year. If he can continue the great play he had the second half of last season, if he can really play his way into being an NBA lottery pick. Seems like he had, as far as being sort of the leader of the team, it seems like he's really matured and can really, kind of guy who can put the team on his back and lead them. I guess one guy, I'm just looking at the roster right here that I'm not sure if Gavin mentioned, Andre Jackson. I'm interested to see if he can sort of become this year's Book Knight and kind of be the guy who, everyone knows has a lot of talent and potential, may not crack the starting five to start the season, but I think a lot of people feel like he'll get a lot of minutes early and at some point, and I've heard he's had some struggles in practice, but at some point be the real talented player he is, maybe get into the starting lineup or at least be a real integral player down the stretch and become a guy who not maybe not in 2021, but the following year it could be a high NBA draft pick as well. So I'll be interested to see how Andre's progression throughout the season.
Dom, did they leave any storylines for you?
Well, they actually did, but obviously this is the season of James Bouknight, the way it was once the season of Jeremy Lamb, or once the season of Kemba Walker, or once the season of Ryan Boatwright, who's a senior. This is the season that's going to be his season, and they're going to go as far as he takes them. But the thing that I'm very interested in with this group, Jared, is who's not going to play. I mean, you look at all of these players, 3 or 4 guys are not going to play if everyone's healthy. I mean, he's only going to play 8, 9 guys at most in a rotation. Because of COVID, you might need more players. But I just look at it and say, well, if Bouknight is what he's supposed to be, and Andre Jackson's what he's supposed to be, where does Tyrese Martin really fit in? And if you're playing, both Gaffney and Cole in the backcourt, where does Brendan Adams get minutes? I mean, when a Cook comes back, where does he get minutes? I mean, I know Tyler Polley's going to be kind of a 3-point specialist, but where do the minutes come from? I just want to know who's not going to play out of these 13. You kind of feel like maybe most of the freshmen are, which is a good thing, but most of the freshmen are going to have to sit and learn for most of the year, which is a lot better, of course, than some of the past teams where freshmen were too much was asked of freshmen. So I think I'm just curious when I watch all these guys is who's not going to play. R.J. Cole didn't come here to sit. Tyrese Martin didn't come here to sit. A lot of the freshmen, I'm sure feel like they came here to play if it's not right away. So yeah, I just wonder how he's going to find enough minutes to keep 13 players happy, or can as the mark of a great. Most coaches can get guys to play for them. Can they get guys to sit for them? That's the mark of a great coach. Can you get guys to buy in to the point where they sit for you?
Yeah, I think some of that shakes out, Dom, as we found out before, and all these teams we cover, they all start talking about playing 10 or 11 and going really deep, and all of a sudden there's 8 core guys or 9. So that's kind of stuff eventually all shakes out, I think.
Well, depth against like Maine and New Hampshire is not the same as depth against Villanova.
I'd be surprised to see Javonte Brown, the freshman from Toronto, and even Richie Springs, who sat out as an academic redshirt last year. I think those 2 guys are probably sort of down at the bottom of the list right now.
Yeah.
And Brendan Adams is interesting. Coach Dan Hurley brought him over here from URI. He recruited him at URI, and he came over with him when Dan was hired. And he hasn't, he had a pretty good year last year, showed some improvement, but he's not been the shooter that Hurley has said he is and has the capability of being. So he's a tough kid, and I wouldn't bet against him, but he's going to have to fight for some minutes this year, no question.
Yeah, Coach Hurley keeps saying that he's a shooter, and we haven't seen it yet. But he said it this preseason too, how that Brendan can shoot, but he's got to shoot better, obviously, to get his minutes.
One area where I think they've got a lot of depth this year is the front court, and it's pretty deep, which it hasn't necessarily been in the past. One guy who had a bit of an up and down role last year was Josh Carlton, and a lot was expected of him last year. We saw how things played out last year. What do you expect out of him this year, and is he going to be a guy that they're relying on for a lot of minutes this season?
I don't know. I think he's pretty important. I don't know if they have a lot of experience depth there. They might have some young front court players, but as far as proven, it looks like Isaiah Whaley is somebody you can count on now. He finished the season so strong, but I think it's really important, Josh, to have a good year for them to play well. I mean, you don't want to rely too much on your young guys. You don't want to all of a sudden be having Richie Springs play a lot of minutes. Supposedly he's a good rebounder, but he doesn't sound like he's developed yet. I just think that Josh is a really important part of the team this year, and he's got to play well.
Yeah, and well-placed moles, as some might say, have been talking about Adama Sanogo and how good he has been in practice, and he's obviously a highly touted recruit anyway, so he could be pushing Josh. I was kind of surprised. For some reason, I didn't realize it, but Josh started every game last year. And we know he tailed off and didn't have a very good season, but he was still in the starting lineup the whole way. So it'll be interesting to see what whether he starts the season in the starting lineup and how his season progresses. But he's lost a lot of weight. The thing about basketball is that I've seen guys who put on too much muscle and kind of lose their touch and lose a little bit of flexibility. He put on a lot of weight last year, but for a big man, it's a little different, I think. But he's dropped a lot of weight now, and I think that might help him.
One question that I'm seeing coming in here in the chat is around Tyler Polley, and this is a guy I wanted to talk a little bit about. Getting an update on his return from injury, and B, we saw in that last game him do more than just shoot threes before he went down with his injury. He was rebounding, being aggressive to the basket. What role do you expect to see out of him this year? Dom, I think it was you who mentioned earlier that he is going to be a three-point specialist. But do you see him kind of purely being out there in that role, or do you see him them trying to get him back into the role where he was in that last game before injury?
Well, I don't know if the role that he was in really exists anymore because, Whaley's kind of got it. If Whaley and Carlton play together, where does Tyler come in? If Sanogo does play a lot, where does he come in? So he's going to have to kind of earn it back. But I think for him, it starts with doing what you do well. He's a three-point shooter. They don't have a lot of that, and he's a guy that if he could come off the bench hot on a consistent basis, come off the bench and hit threes on a consistent basis, much the way remember Niels Gaffey did before he began to start games that year. I think that's where it starts. If he does that, then he'll probably have some opportunities to do some other things. And he's going to have to defend. I mean, any of the guys that don't have a role, they're going to have to defend. That's how they'll get a role in I think in Hurley's eyes. But to answer your question with Tyler Polley, hey, he could shoot, and one thing about basketball, if a guy can shoot, especially the three, they'll find a way to get him out there.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, Dan has kind of mentioned that he sees him as sort of that stretch four this year, and
right.
Partly because of his injury, maybe it keeps him out on the perimeter more, keeps him away from the mix of, possibly re-injuring that knee or taking some of the pressure off him from that way. So I do anticipate him being sort of like that stretch four type of shooting guy.
Yeah, you never know how a guy can come back from injury too. There's always a mental hurdle to clear with that. Sounds like he's physically going to be fine, but that's always hard to tell. And so it might take a few games, a few weeks for him to kind of settle into it.
Another guy coming back from injury that I think everyone is excited to see out there is Cook. What's the latest on him? And when can fans expect to see him out there? Has Coach Hurley kind of given any hints of when he might be ready?
I think it's always been January 1st. Has always been kind of the date that's been circled. If he's able to beat that by a week or two, so much the better. But I think January 1st would be the best guess, especially with the Big East kind of stopping on the 23rd and picking up again on the 30th. I think maybe December 30th might be the day that you could see him start to work his way back into the mix. He's been on schedule for that, if not maybe a little ahead.
They're going to be very cautious with him.
Yeah.
He's too important. They're not going to rush him back. They're going to be very careful with him.
Yeah, I see a question asking if he'll be ready for the season opener. I can guarantee he's not playing on Wednesday if they play. Big East opener would be somewhat more likely, but even now, like Dom said, funny because I remember him saying last year he wanted to be ready for start of Big East play. Well, the Big East play is starting a little earlier than we anticipated, but only a couple of weeks. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him because he does seem to be certainly ahead of schedule that a lot of people thought he might be. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him after the New Year's. Yeah.
I've got a question about leadership heading into this year. And it looks like James Bouknight is trying to step up and be that leader for the team this year. Heading into the season, do you see James as that alpha on the team, kind of playing that Christian Vital role this year?
I mean, I think he wants to be. Isaiah Whaley talking about how, he's been talking a lot in practice and bringing guys together and even talking to the vets, saying this is what you have to do. So he wants to be that guy. That's a lot to take on, to be the star, to be the leader. It can be like a Kemba Walker role where you everybody just follows you. And so but there are some veterans there. I mean, I think Curly called RJ Cole a unifier of people, so he's a guy that can bring people together. I think it's gonna. Last year was clearly Christian Vital was a leader. I think it'll come from different places this year.
I was impressed. UConn had an event, one of the few things I've been able to actually get out and cover of the past 6 months, an event at Rensselaer Field for charity about a month or so ago. And, they had to go, they were handing out, food to people at a food drive. And James, and maybe this is not a great analogy, but he kind of like, when it was time to start, he kind of told everyone, let's go. I've seen players in the past kind of slog through things like that, not really want to be there. He was into it. He was telling his guys, let's go help these people. And it was a small thing, but I was impressed just by kind of like the way he acted on that day. And from all reports from Dan Hurley and others, he's been like that in practice as well.
Teams usually have a couple of different, types of leaders. I think Cole will be one type of leader. He's the point guard. He's the the floor general, and he's the older guy and a unifier. So he'll play some leadership role. But at the end of the day, your best player's got to be your leader. Your best player has got to be your leader. It's got to be that person's team. So I think if we get to late in the season, midway through the season, and James Bouknight is healthy, and we're not saying this is James Bouknight's team. We're not saying James Bouknight is the best player on the floor night after night. There'll be something wrong. So I think ultimately the leader among leaders has got to be James Bouknight. He's got to be the face of the team, whatever that means. That's got to. He's got to be the guy that the guy. Can't put enough space between the and guy. He's got to be the guy.
What's the scouting report on Tyrese Martin and what he's expected to bring to UConn this year?
I don't know.
Versatility.
Yeah, and toughness. What Coach Hurley was talking about do they have enough junkyard dog types? They got finesse, they got athleticism, they got quickness, but do you have the a little more physical this year, he said. But that's, having guys like Martin, I think it's a toughness, versatility, like Dave said. He can move around different. He rebounds very well. I think he can do a lot of things.
I talked to a guy at URI shortly after Tyrese had committed, and he said that, remember the story, I think it was last season, maybe the year before, when URI had lost like 2 or 3 games in a row. They were on the road, and the team was going to go out to do some sort of function to see a movie or something, and Tyrese was so upset with the way they were playing. He basically canceled it. He told the coaches, we're not doing this. And he kind of took it on himself to do that. And so it showed kind of a leadership role and kind of the fact that he takes it seriously. And he's going to be, like Gavin said, he's going to be a tough player and he's going to be versatile. Some people I've talked to think he's really going to be a major player for this team this season. And I wouldn't bet against that.
Yeah, he could be the second scoring option. He could be that important a role. And from everything that I've heard, he is an elite defensive player, and that's going to obviously get you a lot of minutes the way Dan Hurley operates. If you look at the numbers, what he did in the A-10, he's a really good player, and he's not a freshman. He knows what he's doing. So I think the odds of him even maybe playing starter minutes when in a small lineup, I think the odds of that are pretty good. But I don't know, Gavin, is he a junkyard dog, or is he meaner than old King Kong, or is he both?
I think we're going to find out. But
okay.
A guy I like him, he's the older guys don't sit back. We'll find out pretty soon what he's about.
If we're about to see this team suit up next week, what do you guys think the starting rotation looks like come Wednesday night against Central, if that's the case?
Who wants to go first? It's a tough one.
Pick them out of a hat.
I would, Cole and Gaffney are battling for the starting point guard role. I think, I would probably give Cole a slight edge there. Obviously, Bouknight. Isaiah Whaley has Dan Hurley has said from the start that he and Bouknight are the two sure things as far as starting. Then it's, is it Carlton? Is it, it depends on the lineup. Is it a small line? Does Tyrese Martin or Andre Jackson break through to start? I don't know about Andre Jackson maybe to start, but it's a tough call. It's really tough just looking on the roster right now.
I think
Tyler probably will be in the starting lineup, I would think. But he's also a good guy to come off the bench. So
yeah, I go with David. It's a Cole Book night. I bet Josh will start, and then Isaiah. I think the fifth person could be Andre Jackson, could be Tyrese Martin, could be Tyler Pauly,
or it could be Gaffney.
Or it could be Gaffney. They could play because Hurley will play 3 or 4 guards, not to start usually. He'll mix it in, but you're right. Dumb. 3 guards would not be a surprise at all.
Yeah.
Moving on from the team itself, I think another big exciting factor this year is the return to the Big East. I know you guys were all on Big East Media Day. What are your thoughts on the conference heading into the season? Maybe is there anyone outside of Villanova who's the team to beat, a sleeper team maybe that you see rising in the conference? Just to get your thoughts on the Big East.
First of all, just remember now they're not returning to the Big East. This is a different conference. They're joining their old rivals in the new Big East, right? Rejoining the Catholic 7. It's been historically in the 8 years or so that it's existed, it's been one of the best conferences. They've sent Villanova on to win 2 championships, and certainly, the one thing about this conference that's much different from the American is that it's not top heavy. Those teams in the American at UConn, it seemed could never beat, like Houston and Cincinnati, etc. But there was also East Carolina and South Florida and Tulane that UConn generally beat just about every time. Even the 10, 11 teams in this conference are good. So UConn's going to lose some games that you might not figure on paper they're going to lose, because the conference has always been good top to bottom, and you see a lot of upsets in the conference during the year. So that's going to be the big thing, is that UConn really they're not going to have any easy wins. They're going to have to play great every night to have a good record in the conference.
Yeah, I think Creighton. I mean, we all agree that Villanova is the top team in the league, and I actually voted them preseason number 1. And I think they're easily top 5 at the very least. Creighton has the preseason player of the year, and Marcus Zagorowski, a good really good backcourt with a kid named Mitch Ballack, a good 3-point shooter. Providence, I think, is going to be really good. They were really hot. They were even hotter than UConn at the end of last year, believe it or not. That's possible. I think they had won their last 6 games in a row. And they have a kid named David Duke, a kid named AJ Reeves, who was a top UConn who recruited him heavily and didn't have a great year last year, but they have a really good backcourt. And then I think you got Xavier, Butler, are winning programs. St. John seems to be sort of on the rise. I thought they'd be better, but the kid LJ Figueroa ended up transferring. Although someone told me the other day that's actually addition by subtraction, because he wasn't a very popular guy on the team. But yeah, definitely, overall depth. Looks like Georgetown and DePaul are kind of at the bottom, but even DePaul has some talent. And there won't be any easy, like Dom said, there won't be any East Carolinas or South Florida. Well, South Florida would give UConn some problems too towards the end of the tenure there. So, but no, there's no easy outs. It's going to be it's a good league. I do think it's a little maybe a little down from last year, because I think you have 2 definite top 15 type teams, and then I forgot to mention Seton Hall. They're also a borderline top 25 team. So, but then you have kind of 3 teams in the middle there. But we'll see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, there's not much. I agree with you, both you guys. As far as from UConn's perspective, I just think every night having that Big East battle, how are they going to handle it? I mean, there were weaker teams in the last year they would play, and even the teams that aren't as strong in the Big East are going to give you a really tough fight. So that's how is UConn going to respond to that will be interesting.
Who is going to be UConn's biggest rival, in your opinion, in this new Big East? The Syracuse Pits are gone, but some old schools still in there, some new schools. Who do you see being the chief rival heading back into the Big East?
Well, it's probably going to be Villanova. They're probably going to be just about everybody's rival because they're certainly the cream of the league. They've proven that over the last 5 or 6, 7 years with 2 national titles, and I think that would likely be it. But I'd love to see, and I've said this before, and people are probably sick of it, but I'd love to see UConn and Providence kind of rekindle a rivalry that maybe UConn fans never thought was much of a rivalry, and maybe it was more of a rivalry to PC fans. But now that they're PC has obviously improved quite a bit as a program, and with the proximity of the 2 programs and how they're going to be battling on the recruiting trail, I'd love to see that become sort of a border war over the coming years.
Yeah, I think UConn Providence is going to become a big deal. The proximity, the fierceness of the crowds in both places. I do think that will, over time, shake out as the big rival. But I think at the outset, Jared, it's UConn Villanova. I think UConn's coming into this conference. They're kind of coming in to hunt Villanova. Villanova's got the 2 championships. UConn has the 4 previously. To me, that's kind of going to be I think that's going to be the big marquee game at the outset is going to be UConn Villanova.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. I mean, I think Providence would be it's going to be a great rivalry. You have the Hurley and Cooley kind of battle they had at Rhode Island when he was at Rhode Island, but Villanova's the one they're going to be shooting for the whole time. They're the ones that probably get up the biggest for that game because what Villanova represents now. Villanova is where UConn wants to get back to. So I think Villanova for fans would be the biggest, and maybe for the most intensity might be Providence, UConn, just because of the proximity. But a lot of it has to do with the players too. Something I don't think it's as heated between the players as it used to be in the old Big East. Kids are they play with each other in AU ball and see each other a lot more than the old Big East. So it's not as heated as it used to be, I think.
All right, I've got some more lightning round questions here that we'll go through and hopefully have some fun with here. So we'll go around. Dom, you can start on this one. Some of these you got to pull out your crystal ball for, but end of the season, who's averaging more rebounds for this team, Josh Carlton or Adama Sanogo?
Probably average per minute, per 40 minutes. I think it might be Sanogo. Per 40 minutes, but I think per game it'll probably be Carlton. I think he'll earn the playing time to average more per game.
Do we all get a shot at this?
Yeah, everyone gets a shot at these.
Okay.
Let's have some fun.
Carlton, I think we're underestimating how tough it is for a freshman to battle in the Big East down low. So I think Josh Carlton will be average more, and he'll play more minutes so overall.
Yeah, I agree with both. I think Carlton will end up with averaging more rebounds than Sanogo, but I do think Sanogo could have a very, very respectable freshman year.
We'll stick with the front court here. Who averages more minutes, Javonte Brown or Richie Springs?
I'll go with Springs because I think Javonte's a project at this point.
Yeah, Javonte's young, and Coach Hurley talks about Springs being a very good rebounder, and he might be sent in there a few times just to get some rebounds if they're struggling or in foul trouble up front.
Yeah, Springs.
Who do you guys have? If we take out James Bouknight, who's the next leading scorer on this team?
That's a real good question. I mean, I'm tempted to say R.J. Cole. Obviously, he's taken up a big step up in competition from when he played at Howard. But he's a scoring point guard. I would, Polly's a possibility, but how much is he going to be affected by his coming back from his injury? I guess I'll go with Cole.
No, I guess I'm going to agree with Dave. And RJ was a big scorer at Howard. Now, obviously, he's got a different role now.
Right.
And the second leading scorer on the team might only be 13 points a game because, Coach always talked about the balance, and then I have a bunch of guys who average from, 8 to 12. So I'll go with RJ Cole. He did score well against some good teams when he was at Howard. He had 28 against Georgetown. I think he had like 21 against Indiana. I can look at the stats. At Indiana, he had 27 as a freshman. So he did have some good games against good teams. So I think he's got a little scorer's mentality, and he'll be able to go on some kind of streaky runs during games and get his points.
Well, I think Cole is the is an obvious choice because he's going to be on the floor a lot. He's going to have the ball a lot. Although I do think they want him to be more of a pass-first guy than he was at Howard. I think Tyrese Martin could be the number 2 scorer on the team. I think he's going to be on the court enough, and I think he's going to be out there, maybe out there with a lot of emphasis on book night from the defense. I think that might free him up to score some and get to the basket. So I'll go a little bit out of the box here and say that's Tyrese Martin.
Speaking of book night, I like this question that came in on Twitter today from Store South, who everyone's familiar with. And he calls this the James Book Night Award. Who's the player that starts the year coming off the bench and by the end of the season is kind of a mainstay in the starting rotation?
Andre Jackson is the most obvious guy that has that potential. I think he will probably be broken in slowly because don't forget he's coming off the knee injury too. It didn't have a complete summer, complete off season. But I think he would be the guy that probably like his freshman year will probably go similar to what Book Nights did.
Just to break up the agreeing, I'll go with Tyrese Martin, assuming he doesn't start from the get-go. I kind of think it's Andre Jackson, but Martin's obviously an older guy. In fact, I think he's 21, 22 years old. More mature, more experienced, obviously. If Andre has some freshman sort of learning curve there, and Martin starts off kind of as their 6th man off the bench, I'll say Tyrese Martin.
Well, I guess I was going to say either one. I was going to go with Martin after Don said Jackson, but those would be my 1 and 2 choices. If Martin doesn't start, I think he's going to become too valuable unless they just want him in the 6-man role to keep on the bench too long. So if he doesn't start, I'll go with Martin.
Who's the best 3-point shooter on this team outside of Tyler Polley?
I guess Book Night would have to be. That'd be my guess. Especially he's worked on his game a lot. He's they rave about the way he's not only leading but playing and taking charge. I think he's got a ton of confidence right now. They're talking about how confident he is. So I'll go with Book Night.
Yeah, it's funny. We're kind of forgetting about a Cook because we really don't know how effective how much he'll play or how effective he'll be once he comes back. He didn't shoot the ball great last year as a freshman from 3, but he's got a nice form. He's got a nice touch. He could be a guy. He could be that guy if he's healthy enough. But it's just you can't really predict that with him this year because of so many questions surrounding if he'll play, and I think he will play, but how effective he will be coming off a serious injury.
We can move on to the next one here, and these we've got some fun prediction here. Dave, you could start with this one because I know you're a voter. If we set an over/under on Christmas Day, is UConn in the top 25 before or after Christmas?
Well, they only got about 6 votes this week, and so they've got a little bit of work to do, and they're not going to have a great opportunity to build up the resume before Christmas, so they will have played those Big East games. You know what? I'm going to say they will be because I think they'll handle their non-conference, which isn't very strong. And if they're able to, what do they got? Providence, St. John's, DePaul, and they're at are they at Creighton, I believe?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know what? No, I'll change that. I'll say probably not by Christmas, but I think at some point this season they will be. But you said, did you say if you say on Christmas, I'll say they're probably not going to be there quite yet.
I say after, only because I think it's the guys coming off injury and trying to get everything together, and the schedule isn't. You don't have that many big games. You have NC State, and the Big East games even start off. I mean, at Providence would be a good win if they could get that. But I think it's going to take them a little bit longer to really take off. So I'm going to go with after.
Well, I think they kind of have that feel of being a team that's going to be kind of a fashionable pick for the national media. I think the national media is looking for a reason to say UConn's back, Dan Hurley's done it. They're so I have a feeling that with it's only going to take a couple of really impressive wins, for them to do it, to get there. So yeah, it could be before Christmas if they beat Creighton. They beat Creighton on the 20th. And they win before that. Beat Creighton on the 20th. That could do it. So I'm going to say sooner rather than later.
All right, we got a little bit of disagreement finally on that one. This one, the road hasn't been a friendly place for UConn over the past few years. Might not have fans in some of the road environments this year. If we set in over/under on, say, 2.5 road wins this year, do you see UConn being able to win more than 2 road games this year?
Are they going to play more than 2 road games, or are they going to be neutral site games? I mean, I would really, I would throw any home road history or advantage, throw it out, because Hinkle would be a place where I would give them I would say it would be very, very tough for them to win there if they're fans. If there's only a handful of fans, they're a different story. Same thing with Creighton. Same thing with probably a lot of other places too. And these games could be played in a bubble in Mohegan Sun or somewhere else. And so I really wouldn't. I don't think the home road thing is going to be much of a factor for any team this year. And that's why I also think that the idea of rivalries in the Big East is more of a thing for next year, because you're not going to have the fans to really get into that nastiness that. UConn Providence without fans is going to be a lot different than UConn Providence with fans. So I would kind of throw the home road thing aside and just concentrate on how many games they're going to play.
Yeah, the only thing I would throw in there is that they were a better road team towards the end of the year last year when they really came on. And I think they learned not only how to win, but learned how to win on the road. So I think that will help them going into this year. But like Dom said, no fans. It's going to be totally different. I don't even know. I mean, yeah, road win will still be nice, but I think they'll get their share, but it's really kind of even hard to tell what's going to happen.
Well, we learned the key to winning on the road.
Why do teams do so well at home? Often because there's actually been studies on this. I remember this about 8-10 years ago. Refs are affected by a big crowd, big home crowd. The home team will get some calls, whether it's subconscious or not. There's not going to be any fans, so it sounds a little bit silly, but the refs aren't going to be, as intimidated or as influenced as the home crowd. So yeah, I totally agree that home road isn't going to. And UConn's a better team this year; they're in a better league. But I'll say that I definitely would take the over on 2.5 road wins.
On the bright side, with no fans there, we will be able to hear each and every one of Dan Hurley's technicals loud and clear on TV this year. The next one I've got here, UConn was predicted 4th in the Big East preseason poll. It's really no fun to push and say they finished 4th. Do you see them having a better chance of finishing in that top 3 or 5 and on?
I'd say better chance of top 3. I think that, Tom Moore was saying this a couple weeks ago, that he thinks that they were kind of picked more on what they could do than what they've actually done. I mean, they finished tied for 5th in the American last year. Let's not forget that. Not as good a league, but I think the talent and the depth and the potential is there. So I'd be surprised if they finished, certainly lower than 5th. I think they're definitely one of the top 5 teams in the league. And I'd say I'm not as high on Seton Hall as others are. So I would say, anywhere between 2 and 4, more likely like that sort of that 3 and 4 spot sounds good. And I guess I'll say that they have a better chance of finishing above 4th.
I say I'll go below 4th, but only 5th. I say that because they're too good to finish below that. But on the other hand, they haven't gone through even a different Big East season like this is going to be. They haven't gone through a Big East season before. Yes, they're all got all the momentum going forward here, and this is the perfect year to go into it. But until you do it, I think it's and play all these teams and the quality of depth in the league. I think it's difficult. So I'm going to say they'll finish below that, but I would think it wouldn't be any lower than 5th if they did.
Dom, we'll get you on that one.
Yeah, I'm thinking 3rd for them. I don't think higher than 3rd, but I'm thinking they can finish 3rd. I'd be more apt to see them 3rd than below 5th, or 5th or below. I disagree with Dave on Seton Hall. I do like Seton Hall. I know that Miles Powell's gone, but I do think that the supporting cast is going to be better. It's going to have a chance to kind of shine around him, shine with him gone. So I think Seton Hall might be a little underrated with putting them 5th. Providence, we'll see, but I tend to think they're going to be 3rd. That would be my pick. Maybe in that 13 and 7 range for the league.
I know Bryce Aiken, the kid from Harvard, who Seton Hall had was really high on. He's been injured, and it doesn't sound like he's ready to return anytime soon. So that could be a big factor with them, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll do true or false here. True or false, UConn makes the NCAA tournament this year with a 7 seed or better.
7 seed or better. So it's so hard, and how, depending on how many games teams play, how are they going to seed teams? How are they going to come up with net rankings this year and things like that? 7 seed or better would essentially sort of mean kind of like a top 30 team, more or less, right? Boy, I hate to sound like a homer all this throughout this thing, but I guess I'd say because you're right on the cut line, 7. I'll say I'll say no. I'll say lower than a 7. It's worse than a 7 seed.
Wow, that's the 7, the number you picked, makes it really difficult. But
I'm not going to make it easy on you guys. This is a gauntlet.
I'll say they make the tournament 7 seed or better. Probably right at the 7, but I'm going to go with they'll make it with that.
I'll say true, Trebek. And I do think they're going to make the tournament. I don't think, the one thing that Dave pointed out, which we didn't really talk about earlier, if you did play a conference-only schedule, it'd be very difficult, for the metrics, how that would work out for the selection committee if teams played only in conference. So the one thing is, whatever non-conference teams they're able to play, they better win them. You got those Legends Classics games or NC State in Mohegan. They got to win those games. Get those wins, and then you do well in the Big East. And yeah, they could be much higher than a 7 seed if they do that. But if they come out and they lose to Vanderbilt or they lose to one of those teams or 2 of those games in Mohegan Sun, then yeah, it's going to be awfully tough to get a 7 seed. But I think they're going to do well out of the gate. I think they're going to do well in those 3 games of Mohegan Sun if they do play them, and then I think what they do in the Big East will vault them into that 7 seed or higher.
I'll get you out of here on this one, and I saw this one come in the chat, and we've been doing a lot of looking forward, but with the conference change, what are you going to miss most about the AAC? Is it trying to figure out how to fly into Greenville? What are you guys going to miss the most?
Didn't we do this last time?
I think it was missed the least last time.
I guess I would say, not playing Cincinnati. I mean, they were in the Big East with UConn at one time, and I always enjoyed those games. They were always a tough team. When Mick Cronin was there, it was a lot of fun. And obviously he's not there anymore, but I would say not playing Cincinnati because those are always going to grind it out. Rough and tough, kind of old, kind of like the old East kind of games.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. You know, Memphis was a team that it looks like a team that's going to be very good this year. A lot of talent. Once again, we'll see if Penny can coach them up. You know, it was always kind of cool to go there because at least it was one of the few arenas where it was you're going to have a sellout crowd and usually a pretty good opponent. Wichita State was kind of the same way. That'll be interesting to see what happens there now. But I don't know. I mean, you know, I guess I would have. I don't know if I'm missing this, but I guess I would have liked to have seen them maybe kind of develop a little bit more of a rivalry with like a Memphis. Never really materialized. I mean, you know, let's face it. I'm always fascinated by UConn fans who are so dismissive of the AAC, and there's no doubt the Big East is much better. But the UConn really did not live up to its end of the bargain in the time during the American, other than a national championship, which is quite a big other. But I'm off on a tangent here. I'll just say, you know, I guess I'll say I miss some of the big games at Cincinnati, Memphis, Wichita. Those are kind of fun, and the good weather and the 2 stops in Florida every year wasn't bad either.
Yeah, I do like Tampa. Of course, kind of my home away from home for a lot of years. So I'll miss going there. I'm going to miss that feeling of pure exhilaration anytime the plane touched down at Bradley, and you knew that one of those long trips was behind you. You know, and that I'm going to miss that feeling. You know, I kind of just reiterate what Dave said. Nothing wrong with the American Conference. The basketball was good. The cities were good. I mean, nothing wrong with any of that. But UConn just didn't fit in it. It just was not the right fit for UConn. And so there's not much that I'm going to miss about the conference simply because, you know, it just didn't work for UConn. You felt like you were covering a fish out of water. So there's really, I just think this was the move to make. They made the right move. And, you know, I do want to look forward and not back to the American Conference. That's a chapter in the history that's going to be probably forgotten, except for 2014.
Guys, I really appreciate the time tonight. I really had a lot of fun getting ready for the season with you. We'll all keep our fingers crossed that next Wednesday we've all got a game to talk about. And Neil does send his apologies for not being able to make it and get his connection going there. But feel free to tweet or get any other questions his way. You could bother him that way for not being able to be here with us. But again, thank you everyone. Really appreciate everyone who joined us live, and thanks again to this great panel for the time tonight. Have a good night, everyone.
Jared. Thanks,
Thank you, Jared.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely.